Most people think early retirement dies from a market crash or a layoff. It doesn't. It dies quietly, years earlier, from 5 ordinary-looking habits that feel completely responsible while you're doing them. You get the email at 9:14 on a Tuesday. Subject line, raise approved. $4,000 more a year, starting next paycheck. You do the thing everyone does. You picture the number sitting untouched in your brokerage account, compounding, buying you back a year of your life. Then you close your laptop and go to lunch with people from the team, and somewhere between the parking lot and the restaurant, the $4,000 starts finding places to live. A better lease, a car that doesn't rattle at 60, a vacation that you've earned. None of it feels like a decision. That's the mechanism. Lifestyle creep doesn't announce itself as spending, it disguises itself as upgrading. Imagine a hot air balloon that adds 1 sandbag of ballast every time it catches a gust of wind meant to lift it higher. From the ground, it looks like the balloon is doing fine, still floating, still moving, but it never actually climbs, because every gust that should have taken it up, instead, gets spent holding its altitude exactly where it already was. Your income is the wind. Your new spending is the sandbag. You are not sinking. You're also not rising. That's worse, in its own quiet way, because a market crash at least tells you something is wrong. This tells you nothing at all. The numbers on your bank statement look healthier every year, so you assume you're winning, when really, you've just built a slightly nicer version of the treadmill. Your FIRE number is your annual spending multiplied by 25. Bump your lifestyle from $50,000 a year to $80,000, and you haven't added $30,000 of cost. You've added $750,000 to the number you need before you're allowed to stop. That's not a rounding error. That's a decade, sometimes more, added to your working life by decisions that each felt like they cost nothing at the time. Your partner, Jess, doesn't clock it as a betrayal of the plan. She just notices, 18 months in, that the spreadsheet you built together during a rainy Sunday afternoon, the one with the little chart climbing toward freedom, hasn't moved the way it was supposed to. She doesn't say much. She just starts quietly tracking the credit card statements herself, which is its own kind of warning sign. If you were paying attention, you're not, yet. You're still telling yourself you deserve this. You do deserve it. That's the trap. Deserving things and affording early retirement turn out to be 2 completely separate questions, and nobody warns you that you have to pick one budget line at a time which one wins. 2 years pass, and the balance in your high-yield savings account has actually grown. $22,000 sitting there, untouched, and you feel good every time you check it because it never goes down. That's exactly the problem. Cash that never goes down is also cash that never grows. Not really. After you subtract inflation, that $22,000 is quietly losing purchasing power. Every single year it sits there being safe. You've confused not losing with winning. Imagine hiring a delivery driver, paying him a full day's wage, and then having him park the truck in your driveway for 8 hours because you're worried about traffic. The package never gets damaged, sure, but it also never arrives, and you paid full price for the privilege of it going nowhere. That's your savings account. The most common mistake people make chasing FIRE isn't spending too much. Plenty of disciplined savers get this part right. It's saving diligently and then leaving that money in cash instead of putting it to work in low-cost index funds, where it can actually compound. A high savings rate parked in a checking account is just deferred spending wearing a costume. The market, over any 20-year stretch, has historically returned somewhere around 7% a year after inflation. Cash sitting in a savings account, even a good one, is lucky to keep pace with inflation at all. Run that gap forward across 15 years on $100,000, and you're not talking about a few $1,000s of difference. You're talking about the difference between retiring at 48 and retiring at 55. Your friend Marcus, who works 2 cubicles down and has a fraction of your discipline, put half of what you saved into index funds 3 years ago and never looked at it again. He doesn't check it daily. He barely checks it yearly. He's now, on paper, ahead of you, not because he's smarter, not because he earns more, but because his money has been working an extra shift every single day while yours has been sitting in a drawer feeling responsible. There's a particular kind of quiet that happens when you realize your caution was actually a cost. Nobody warns you that the safest feeling choice and the correct choice are sometimes standing on opposite sides of the room. By the 5th year, the spreadsheet says you're on track, and on track feels like something you can finally relax into, until your dentist mentions, almost in passing, that you should really get that wisdom tooth looked at before it becomes a real problem. It's not a real problem yet. Nothing about your health is a real problem yet. That's exactly when the mistake gets made. Not in the crisis, but in the years before it, when you build a plan assuming your body and your circumstances will simply hold steady until you're 65 and Medicare finally shows up to bail you out. Here's the mechanism nobody puts in the spreadsheet. If you retire at 50, you are on your own for healthcare for up to 15 years, and out-of-pocket costs for a couple in that stretch can run well into 6 figures before Medicare eligibility even begins. Imagine training for a marathon by only ever practicing the first 20 miles, because you assume the last 6 will somehow take care of themselves. You show up race day in incredible shape for a race you haven't actually finished planning for. That's retiring early without a healthcare bridge. You feel ready. You are ready for the part you rehearsed. Sam Dogan, one of the earliest and most prominent voices in the entire FIRE movement, retired at 34 thinking $80,000 a year in passive income would fund a quiet, modest life on a fruit farm. It didn't hold. His life changed in ways his younger self hadn't modeled. Kids, a different city, different costs, and years later he found himself estimating expenses closer to $260,000 a year, eventually heading back into some form of work despite having made it by every early measure. The lesson isn't that he failed. The lesson is that even the person who wrote the playbook underestimated how much his own future self would cost. Your future self is not a smaller, cheaper version of you who's grateful just to be free. Your future self still gets sick sometimes, still wants dinner out, still, occasionally, needs a root canal at the worst possible time. Funny how freedom always seems to come with an invoice nobody mailed you in advance. Somewhere around year 7 you hit the number. The actual number, the one from the spreadsheet, the one you built the entire plan around. And you don't quit. You tell yourself you'll give it 6 more months. Just to build in a cushion. Just to be safe. Just because the market's been a little choppy lately and you'd hate to time it wrong. 6 months becomes a year. The cushion becomes a new cushion under the first cushion. This is the part almost nobody talks about on a highlight reel, because it doesn't look like failure from the outside. It looks like prudence. It looks like being smart with money. Right up until you notice you've now missed 2 of your kids' summers chasing a number that was, mathematically, already enough 18 months ago. Imagine a rock climber who reaches the summit, radios down that they've made it, and then keeps climbing anyway because the peak might not be the real peak. There is no version of that decision that ends with more time at the top. There's only a version that ends with less time, spent higher up, alone. The most common misconception about FIRE isn't about the math. The math, for most discipline savers, actually works. It's the belief that the number is the finish line. It isn't. The number is just the point where continuing to work becomes a choice instead of a requirement. And plenty of people, once they arrive there, discover that fear is a much better motivator to keep saving than it ever was to actually enjoy the thing they saved for. Jess starts asking, gently at first, when enough is going to actually mean enough. You don't have a good answer. You have a spreadsheet with a slightly higher number on it than the one from last year, which isn't the same thing as an answer, though it can trick you into thinking it is, for a surprisingly long time. By year 9, something shifted that the spreadsheet never tracked, because the spreadsheet was never built to track it. You used to run 3 times a week. Now it's been 4 months. You used to see Marcus and his family every other weekend. Now you see them at the holidays, if the schedule lines up. None of this was a decision either. It's the same mechanism as the lifestyle creep from year 1, just aimed at a different resource. You didn't decide to trade your evenings and your friendships for the extra hours of overtime and side consulting that padded the safety margin. It just happened. The way water finds the lowest point in a yard without anyone digging a channel for it. Imagine spending a decade meticulously restoring a house so it'll be perfect the day you finally move in. Sanding, painting, replacing every fixture, and realizing, on moving day, that you're too exhausted from the renovation to actually enjoy living there. The FIRE community itself has started reckoning with this out loud. Financial planners now openly warn that the extreme frugality and overtime culture baked into the early years of the movement can cost people their 20s and 30s in ways compound interest can't buy back, no matter how good your returns were. Health isn't guaranteed. Neither is the version of your relationships that existed before you started grinding. You reach your actual number in year 11, slightly later than planned because of the extra cushions, Because of the healthcare gap you eventually had to plan around properly. Because of 3 years of savings sitting idle in cash before you moved it. 11 years instead of the 7 you modeled at the start. Not a catastrophe. Just quietly, compoundingly, later than it needed to be. The exact shape of every mistake that came before it, added together and handed to you as a bill with no itemized list. You do retire, eventually, later than the spreadsheet promised, richer in some ways and thinner in others than you expected. You take the trip you always said you'd take. You call Marcus, and it's easier than you thought it would be to pick the friendship back up, though you both silently notice the 4 years that got compressed into a Tuesday phone call. This is where you'd expect the redemption arc, the tidy bow, and there is one, just not the one you pictured at the start. The actual win isn't the number, it's noticing, this time, what the sandbags look like before you tie them on. It's putting the cash to work instead of admiring it for standing still. It's building the healthcare bridge before you need to walk across it in a hurry. It's deciding, in writing, what enough actually means before the fear of not enough gets to define it for you. None of this requires a guru, a course, or someone selling you a secret system for 6 easy payments. If anyone tells you retiring early is a secret, the only thing they've discovered is your credit card number. It requires doing the boring thing 4 years earlier than feels urgent, which is the entire trick nobody wants to hear because it doesn't fit on a thumbnail. And as you're sitting there, finally on the other side of it, you watch someone at the office get an email at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning, subject line, raise approved, and you watch their face light up the exact same way yours did, all those years ago, already picturing where that money's gonna grow, with absolutely no idea yet about the sandbags.